Greetings everyone, this is Jed Shlackman, and for this video I'll be speaking about how we can have a more balanced self-concept or a more balanced assessment of ourself or other constructs or groups or paradigms that we might be looking at in life. When we consider how we examine ourselves or judge or evaluate ourselves, it's helpful to realize that we all have a distorted self-image. So no one is really fully balanced and whole. And so they're looking at themselves and at other people or other things in life through the lens or through that filter that's already distorted in some way. So we have a hard time really having a balanced way of looking at ourselves, of assessing who we are, of how we're functioning, of what we're creating or expressing in our life. In the field of psychology, there has been discussion over the years of the ideas of a superiority complex and an inferiority complex. Alfred Adler was the psychologist who actually coined those terms in that professional field. And we can see these types of patterns in our lives where sometimes we kind of exaggerate ourselves to appear better or more successful or more desirable. And in other cases, people will put themselves down. People will criticize or denigrate themselves as if there's some benefit or reward actually to putting yourself down in those ways. If we were to look at the roots of these patterns in people's lives, we could see that there's typically some reward or gain or some form of desired feedback that people may receive when they act in those particular ways. So in some cases, a person is expected to exaggerate their self-image, to have that sort of superiority complex, to deny their own faults or their own limitations, to constantly try to put themselves above other people. Whereas in other instances, there's actually some type of reward or some type of desired feedback that's provided when the person puts themselves down, when they diminish their own self-worth or accomplishments, when they go out of their way to try to humble themselves. So we can get rewarded for either of those types of behaviors by our social environment or by some aspect of our own mind, of our own belief system about what's a desired way to act or function. So those factors make it difficult to really assess or evaluate ourselves, how we function in life. We can also notice that when we are attached to some other group identification, it's hard for us to have a balanced, a relatively objective assessment of that group. We have some type of emotional attachment to that group identification. It could be to your own family, to your culture or society. It could be to a professional group or a company that you work at. It could be to a religious or spiritual group, to a political group, pretty much any group that exists in human society. For a person who identifies themselves strongly with that group, or that identification is an important part of that individual's identity, then it's hard for that person to really have a balanced observation or assessment of that group that they belong to. So we should consider these things if we want to really have more self-awareness if we want to look at ourselves from a more balanced perspective, we kind of have to step outside of ourself, outside of what we think of as our identity, what we have imagined ourselves to be, what other people may perceive or view us as. We want to get beyond all of that and be more tapped into or connected to some form of higher consciousness. You could say it's your soul or higher self or a divine self, and how that higher aspect of self, or that more encompassing aspect of self, might perceive you. If we were at that state or level of consciousness of the totality or absolute of the unified infinite consciousness, then we would look at ourselves and other people perhaps in much different ways. We would probably be more loving and accepting. We would likely more easily see both the strengths and weaknesses, areas in which a person has shown a lot of development or progress, as well as the areas in which they have some deficits or weaknesses, and to really love and embrace each one either way, to not see those who are less far along their path as any less than those who have moved further along their path. For ultimately it's one infinite being, one infinite creative consciousness that's playing all the roles, all the characters in the drama of life. So from that point of view, there isn't really that much need, in a sense, to compare ourselves to one another. We can use one another as reference points and as sources of inspiration to see what potential there is, but there's no reason to in any way reject or condemn anyone for being who or what they are. So that would be a more balanced way of looking at all of us, at ourselves and other people. A more spiritual perspective rather than the human ego perspective. For the ego really has no choice but to try to compare itself, since it's attached to this idea of being separate and needing to do or achieve something to have a sense of self-worth, to feel validated. We are each innately worthy, innately valuable and important to the totality of creation, although that's often hard for our minds to accept, since the mind is always looking to achieve something or to obtain something for some future illusion of attainment. Really, there is only the now. And so if we could learn to be just more present in the moment and more accepting of ourselves as we are in the moment, we'd have more inner peace, and we'd have more balance and equilibrium within our being, which ironically would enable us to see things more clearly and to understand where we are lacking in some way, or where we are not up to what we'd like to achieve as our ideal, as well as where we have accomplished a lot, where we have progressed a lot, where we have developed a lot in our human journey. This is, of course, a complex topic. The ego aspect of consciousness is something that's always a part of human experience. So no one goes into a permanent state of transcending it, of transcending that ego while they're here in the human body having a human lifetime. Just the fact that our body has its own needs and desires and programming limits the capacity of an individual to perceive things completely from the state of consciousness of the undivided infinite creator. So with all of that said, I would like to encourage each of you to go further on your path of self-exploration, of self-awareness. For those that are interested in spiritual development and holistic health, I'm inviting each of you to view some more of my YouTube videos. You can also visit my website to learn about the healing resources that I facilitate. That site is phinsights.com. That's phinsights.com. For now, I'd like to wish each of you a wonderful day. Namaste.